Good evening, and welcome back to Wisdom by the Fireside. Tonight, let the flames carry us back to a time of dust, silence, and long-forgotten dreams. But what if I told you that buried in the dust of the Great Depression, a boy, mute since birth, found a way to speak louder than anyone in his town ever had, and what he did would echo through generations until the world could no longer ignore him. This is the story of Elias, the voiceless farmhand who rose from invisible dust to stand on the grandest stage of all. Elias was born in 1932 in Clay County, Kansas, in a battered clapboard house on the edge of a wheat field that stretched beyond what the eye could see. He didn't cry when he came into the world. His mother, Alma, took it as a bad sign. Doctors confirmed he had a rare condition, congenital aphonia. His vocal cords were perfectly formed, but failed to produce sound. In Dust Bowl, Kansas, where families could barely afford bread, a child without a voice was considered a burden too heavy. But not to Alma. She taught Elias to read, using Bible verses written in ash on the barn walls. She taught him to speak with his eyes, his hands, his kindness. She believed God had given him a different language, and the world just hadn't learned it yet. School was cruel. Kids mocked him. Teachers gave up. He was pushed to the back of every classroom. Even the kind ones whispered, "He's sweet, but he'll never amount to anything." By 12, Elias had dropped out. He worked odd jobs at the grain mill, shoveled stalls, chopped firewood. He never asked for more, never complained. He would simply smile, tip his cap, and move along. But Alma, she kept praying. Every night, she'd sit beside him, holding his hand, whispering, "One day, God will make the world see who you are." In 1948, when Elias turned 16, his world cracked open. A storm unlike any other swept across Kansas, hail the size of fists. The family's old barn collapsed, burying their livestock. Their wheat crop was decimated. That night, Alma had a stroke. She survived, but never walked again. And Elias became everything: caregiver, provider, protector. He built a new shelter with his bare hands. He cooked, cleaned, harvested. He even fashioned a makeshift wheelchair for Alma, using cartwheels and lumber scraps. But no one outside their tiny circle ever noticed. Elias remained invisible until the letter came. It was 1950 when the letter arrived, sealed in a navy blue envelope with a gold emblem on the flap. It came from the Kansas Agricultural Cooperative, inviting E. Whitaker to a statewide young farmers initiative. They had no idea Elias was mute, only that he'd been listed as a land laborer under his late father's name. Alma clutched the letter with trembling hands. "This is it, Elias. Maybe this is how they see you." Elias didn't nod. He simply held the letter, staring at it like it was a map out of silence. But how could he attend a public competition where speech was required? The day came. Elias wore his father's jacket and boarded a dusty Greyhound bus headed to Topeka. He had with him only two things: a leather-bound notebook filled with charcoal sketches of irrigation layouts, and a small wooden box containing seeds he'd engineered from crossbreeding wheat and rye, resilient to drought. At the event, dozens of young men stood behind podiums, giving speeches on yield efficiency, soil nutrition, and crop rotation. Elias, standing last in line, looked like a ghost in their shadow. A judge approached. "Son, where's your voice?" Elias opened his notebook and scribbled, "I don't have one, but I have something to say." When it was his turn, he didn't step to the podium. Instead, he walked to a patch of dry soil in the corner of the auditorium, knelt, and began drawing. First, a diagram of his irrigation system, then a rotating crop plan based on root compatibility. Then he opened the wooden box and showed the seeds. People whispered, some snickered, but the head judge, a woman named Edith Wells, didn't laugh. She walked up to Elias, looked him in the eye, and said, "Son, can you come back tomorrow and teach this to our board?" Elias wrote back, "If you'll listen." She nodded. That night, Alma cried for the first time in years, not from sadness, but from hope. And when Elias returned 2 days later, the Kansas Agricultural Cooperative named him Innovator of the Year. But the story doesn't end there, because what Elias did next was what no one saw coming. Elias used the prize money, not for comfort, but to buy a patch of scorched, abandoned farmland near Salina, Kansas. Locals laughed. "Even weeds don't grow there," one man said. But Elias saw something different. He studied wind currents, soil minerals, and shade lines. He built a greenhouse from scrap metal and war surplus glass. And then, using the drought-resistant hybrid seeds he'd designed, he started planting. Not just wheat, not just rye, but fruits, vegetables, herbs, things Kansas soil hadn't hosted in decades. By 1955, his land bloomed like a secret garden in the middle of nowhere. And suddenly, people started showing up. At first, it was out of curiosity, then desperation. A widow whose farm had failed. A veteran returning from Korea with no work. A single mother with 5 kids and nowhere to go. Elias didn't turn anyone away. He taught them how to plant, rotate, harvest. He let them sell produce under one name, Dust Light Farm. By 1960, Dust Light was not just a farm. It was a community, one built by the voiceless, the forgotten, the nobodies. Elias never spoke a word, but his kindness spoke volumes. Reporters came. "Who owns this place?" they asked. No one answered, because it belonged to everyone who believed. That same year, Alma passed away peacefully in her sleep. They buried her under a tall oak at the edge of Dust Light Farm. Elias carved the headstone himself. No dates, no titles, just one line. She saw who I was before the world ever did. But not everyone was pleased. Large agricultural corporations began circling. Dustlight was drawing attention and profits away from their sterile, chemical-fed farms. In 1963, Elias received a formal offer, $2 million for the land. He didn't even read the rest of the letter. He tore it in half and planted wildflowers over the envelope. The corporations didn't give up. They sent more offers, more threats. Inspectors showed up without notice. One evening, someone even set fire to the chicken coop. The community rebuilt it by dawn. And Elias, he carved a wooden sign near the entrance of the farm. If you come with greed, you'll leave with nothing. If you come with need, you'll leave with more than you brought. By the 1970s, Dustlight Farm had expanded into an education hub. Elias built a shed-turned classroom where he taught soil care, organic cycles, and self-reliance, all through signs, gestures, and illustrations. Kids loved him, adults admired him, and slowly, a legend began to form. In 1984, a young reporter from Chicago named Teresa visited Dustlight. She'd heard rumors of the mute man who feeds the hungry. She was skeptical, but after spending 1 week living there, she returned to the city and wrote a piece titled, "The Man Who Grew a Voice from Dirt." It went viral. Dustlight became a national symbol for sustainable farming and human dignity. Television shows wanted Elias. So did late-night hosts. He never accepted. But what he did do was quietly agree to let a deaf filmmaker named Omar Lynn produce a documentary, not for money, but for a message. The documentary, Silent Harvest, aired on PBS in 1986. It showed Elias writing, drawing, and gently guiding the hands of broken people, mending them with seeds and sunlight. At the end of the film, Omar signed, "Elias never needed a voice. He was God's whisper on earth." By 1990, Dustlight had fed over 10,000 families. But the story was far from over. Because in 2003, something happened that shook Elias more than any fire or drought ever had. It started with a cough. At first, Elias thought it was just dust or age, but the coughing got worse. The community doctor, Dr. Herman, finally convinced him to go in for scans. The diagnosis came back: stage 3 lung cancer. Everyone was stunned. Elias, who had never smoked, who lived on fresh air and clean food, how could this happen? He scribbled just one line to Dr. Herman. Maybe God is calling the roots home. The town begged him to get treatment. Even the governor offered to pay for the best care in Denver. Elias refused. Instead, he wrote, "If I only have a few seasons left, I want to spend them planting, not fighting." In the next few months, something changed at Dustlight. People who had long moved away returned. Adults Elias had helped as children. They brought seeds, tools, and tears. One of them was a woman named June, who had come to Dustlight in 1972 as a runaway teenager. Now a professor at UC Berkeley, she brought 30 of her students with her to learn from Elias, calling it a pilgrimage. Another was Ray, a former addict Elias had taken in decades ago. Now a successful contractor, he renovated the entire Northfield irrigation system, quietly, in 3 days. And finally, Omar Lean returned, now blind from a degenerative disease. He came to say goodbye, but Elias only smiled, took his hand, and led him to the garden. Together, they planted sunflowers. As spring of 2005 turned to summer, Elias grew weaker. He slept in the greenhouse, surrounded by vines and warmth. One morning the sun rose, but Elias didn't. He passed away in his sleep, peacefully, silently. In his pocket was a folded paper. "When I leave, don't mourn, just plant. That's how you keep me talking." The town held the funeral under the oak where Alma was buried. Thousands came. There was no sermon, no music. Only seeds passed from hand to hand, and tears. After Elias passed, Dustlight could have vanished like so many forgotten dreams. But instead, it flourished, because what Elias had built wasn't just a farm, it was a movement. By 2010, Dustlight Foundation was established by June and several of Elias's old students. Its mission was simple: grow people through soil, restore dignity through work. They didn't take corporate sponsors. They relied solely on individual donations and volunteer hours. Within 5 years, they had helped create 12 satellite farms across rural America, from Arkansas to Arizona, each modeled after Elias's original layout and values. Each farm taught self-sufficiency, welcomed the voiceless, and gave second chances. And at the center of each was a quiet garden with a small sign: "Plant here if you've ever been ignored." In 2018, Elias was posthumously awarded the Presidential Citizens Medal. The award was accepted by Claire, one of the original children Elias taught in the 1960s. She was now in her 70s, and her speech made headlines. She stepped up to the podium and said, "Elias never spoke a word, but he told me I was worthy when no one else did. And that message, silent as it was, saved my life." And in 2022, a viral TikTok video changed everything again. A young influencer named Jalen, battling depression, spent a summer volunteering at one of the Dustlight farms. He posted a raw, tear-filled video about how planting tomatoes with strangers gave him hope again. The video hit 8.7 million views in 4 days. Suddenly, youth from across the country started signing up to volunteer. Dustlight wasn't just history anymore, it was the future. Elias, the voiceless boy of Kansas, had started a chain reaction that now reached generations he never lived to see. In 2023, a group of Dustlight volunteers organized a 48-hour live stream called the Silent Voice Marathon. to raise funds for a new farm in Appalachia. They shared Elias's story in bits and pieces, his drawings, his seeds, his signposts. They read old letters. They stood in his greenhouse and just sat in silence for minutes at a time, letting the peace he had lived in wash over thousands watching online. The goal was to raise $20,000. They raised $1.4 million. And it wasn't corporations donating, it was teachers, it was bus drivers, it was teenagers with minimum wage jobs. People who whispered, "He made me feel seen." Later that fall, Dustlight was featured in a Smithsonian exhibit called Voices That Changed America. In the corner of the room was Elias's original notebook, weathered, smudged, and sacred. On the final page, dated just weeks before his death, he had written, "If they forget my name, let them remember the hands that healed, the ground that gave, and the God who never needed a microphone." And even in 2025, Dustlight still stands. Every season, volunteers return to Kansas to walk the original fields. They plant, harvest, pray. They tell stories of a man who never spoke, but somehow told the world everything it needed to hear. And when a child asks, "Why do we do it this way?" someone always answers, "Because Elias did." So what does Elias's story teach us? That triumph doesn't always wear medals or echo in applause. Sometimes it moves quietly, invisibly, rooted in love, watered by faith, and grown through the hands of someone no one thought would matter. Elias wasn't a politician, wasn't a preacher, wasn't even a speaker. But he showed the world that what you build with purpose will outlast what others build for power. That being voiceless doesn't mean being powerless. That faith, kindness, and action are a language the soul never forgets. And tonight, as we sit together by the firelight, may we remember this. If you feel unseen, unheard, unimportant, there is soil in your life just waiting to bloom. You don't need permission to start planting. You just need faith that what you grow will matter. Because it will. Thank you for being here with us, around our little circle of warmth. Tonight, you've heard a story not just about a man, but about what one life, quiet, determined, faithful, can do in a noisy world. If the story touched your heart, share it to the ones you love. And if you would like to listen to more like it, you know where to find us.